Hello and welcome to the Voice of TOD. I'm Tom, and today we're going to talk about my favourite TV show of all time, Firefly. In this episode we're going to take a look at Shindig, episode 4 in the series and my personal favourite. We're going to continue on with a new episode reviewed each Wednesday until we get to Serenity, the film that rounds out the main story set up here in the TV show. These reviews will be filled with spoilers, so if you haven't seen Firefly, I highly recommend you do, but don't just take my word for it. Check it out, see what you think. If it's not your thing, that's absolutely fine. You can still watch this review. And with that, let's talk about Shindig. We're going to take a look at what our heroes are up to, and some of my favourite moments in this episode. Spoiler alert, all the moments in this episode are my favourites. But I think the best place to start is the beginning. We're open in another bar. I do like these Firefly bars. They have just a really nice atmospheric feel to them. But Mal gets into a brawl, as you would expect, after stealing from, the guy he steals from I think is a slaver, so it's probably justified. But this time he's with Jane and Inara. Inara doesn't do any fighting, but Jane likes to punch people, so that's cool. But they do start out by playing hollow pool, which is very disappointing, because the sound that it makes when you pot a ball is just horrible. When you pot a ball in pool, it should sound like a deep thud, like modern or earth pool tables do, I guess, current pool tables. With this, it just sounds like stupid lasers or a circus going off, and it's just horrible. Absolutely horrible. And that's probably the only negative you're going to hear from me about this episode today. So I thought we'd keep that in just for perspective. But this episode is based on Persephone, and we get to see a familiar face thrown into the mix as well. Having just finished a job at some point between last episode and this, the crew are there to sell the goods and gather some supplies. The first great moment in this episode is Kaylee's window shopping. It's just a joy to watch. Her excitement over the dresses, Wash's excitement over the girls in the dresses, and it's just a good scene with Kaylee and Zoe taking centre stage. We haven't really had much of the two of them together. There hasn't been a huge amount of dialogue sharing scenes with just those. This is the focus. And okay, they're talking about dresses, which is a foreign language to me and Wash and Jane, but it's a really nice scene with Wash providing some comedy and basically the male perspective, Jane being Jane. But Inara is mentioned quite a few times, and this gets Mal into a grouch. Mal's already in a bad mood because he has seen the guy who Inara is spending this time with on Persephone. He's not a fan, but he, as I say, gets a little bit grouchy and snaps at Kaylee. He's quite cruel actually, and Zoe very quickly puts him in his place, and everybody but Jane walk off, leaving him in the middle of the town to be accosted by Badger and his armed goons. Now Badger is a very classy gentleman, as I'm sure you will all agree. So, with the job that Badger has to offer Mal, they retreat to Badger's lodgings, where they have afternoon tea. Afternoon tea! Badger is the epitome of the American idea of a British gentleman. Alright, he's maybe slightly scummier than a high society, well, he's much scummier than a high society hoity-toity fellow, but just everything about Badger is very stereotypical British, I think, as a Brit, and I'm nothing like any of this. But afternoon tea is just, it fits, it works so well, and it just makes me laugh. It's just ridiculous. We're in a sci-fi show and they're having afternoon tea. But we know that Badger has aspirations of being a high society fellow. And as a high-class gentleman, that would offer him was the ability to get into contracts with certain people and make more money. But because he will never be there, and he is a slimy worm, in all honesty, he needs Mal. Which brings us to this week's caper. While we're discussing the details, I think this is probably the best scene. I think it has the most quotable lines. I think the dialogue, I say this every week, but the dialogue to this show is really well done. But here it really shines. It's quick, it's witty, there's great interplay between Mal and Badger, with Jane chipping in for either side. It just works wonderfully. It works so well. But this week's caper. Make contact with Warwick Harlow, who is a gentleman of high stature, and transport his cargo off-world, which is against the official rules, but that's never going to stop somebody like Mal and Badger. So, we need to get Mal into the ball that it just so happens Inara is attending with Atherton Ward, villain of the week, and honestly, the biggest prick in the universe. He is, I would say, quite a strong rival for Inara's affections here, but luckily Mal and a second has an invitation to the ball to mess up Inara's plans a little bit, which isn't a primary task, but it's certainly going to happen when you put Mal and Inara together. We do spend a little bit of time with Inara and Atherton, who is played by Edward Atherton, and honestly he is just a giant prick, and he gets worse over the episode. He's paid for Inara's company. That's Inara's job, she's a companion. But that means that he thinks he's entitled to treat her basically like a slave. She's there to look good on his arm and not really do much else. Well, not in public anyway. And he's a total jerk. We do see what the crew are doing while all this is going on. Jane, Simon and Buck are playing poker for chores, which of course Jane is cheating at. River delabels all the cans for some mystery meals, and Wash and acting Captain Zoe, well, they're having a party of their own, and it's really nice to see the two of them just being the two of them. While we know they're married, we can see the kind of relationship that they have. We've never really seen them being themselves together. I think this is a really nice moment, and it just shines a light on really how the crew interact on their off time. I think it's brilliant. I think it's really well done, and much needed to flesh out the rest of the crew. But the main focus this week is Mal and Inara and Kaylee. Which brings us to Kaylee's entrance at the party as Mal is acting as her date. The dress that Kaylee is wearing, the one from the window, is awful. It's hideous. The joy that it brings her is just wonderful. She's absolutely wonderful throughout all of this. Kaylee is so honest and innocent and filled with childlike wonder at so much. She's never moved in these kinds of circles. She's only ever dreamed about balls like this, or whatever she's read in whatever fiction is available at this time. But she clearly doesn't fit, and we get that scene with a couple of mean girls who are basically high society wasters, who are put in their place by Murphy, who takes Kaylee under his wing. He's an older gentleman, very kind it seems, although he does hate useless people. But he takes Kaylee under his wing, and she spends the rest of the ball talking to a group of gentlemen about ships, mechanics, and basically everything that Kaylee knows. They're clearly enthralled by her knowledge. It's just wonderful. But what's Mal doing while this is happening, I hear you ask? well, he's making contact with Harrow. Harrow refuses to work with him. He doesn't know Mal. He doesn't want to do business with people he doesn't know, which is fair. So Mal asks for a dance with Inara. Atherton allows, and they have some nice little quirky dialogue moments between them. It's here that Inara tells Mal that Atherton has offered for her to stay with him and be his kept woman. This kind of ruffles Mal again, because we know that Mal has feelings for Inara. We know that he's incapable of sharing them, but that doesn't stop him being, well, childish about the whole thing. But when Atherton gets a little jealous, he gets quite handsy with her, really, which isn't cool. Mal hits him square in the face. Rightly so. But what that means in high society rules is that a duel to the death is declared on the morrow. Now Mal's a fighter. Well, he's more of a brawler. He's not a swordsman. And this duel is with fencing blades or rapiers. And it's not really a style of fighting that Mal is comfortable with. Let's put it that way. I do like the focus of Mal and Inara in this episode, and we get another wonderful scene of the two of them while Mal is, I'm going to say staying, he's more held captive at Atherton's lodgings, so he can't run away from the duel basically, and bring dishonour. During the duel you can name a second who will fight in your place, and Harrow actually stands up and takes that one for Mal, so we're starting to see that connection with them. Harrow's quite amused that Mal punched Atherton. Inara goes to see Mal late in the night to give him a few pointers, and we do dive into the more of a will they won't they relationship. It's clear that they care for each other, but Mal keeps with the put downs mainly about her job and being a companion, even though he's just punched a guy for doing the same thing basically. Mal's a very flawed character, and that's apparent every episode. But that's why we love him. But on to the duel. Mal isn't great. And when he thinks he's doing really well, it's really Atherton just playing with him. He does take a bit of a beating and some deep wounds. But, having been... and I don't know how this duel works. Because Mal is beaten, he's on the ground. Atherton is ready to kill him, but Inara steps in. She says that she'll stay with him if she leaves Mal alive. And that's the point that Mal springs into action, picks up the blade that he was disarmed. So he picks up the blade off the floor and basically goes at Atherton. I think he cuts him across the face and then he knocks him to the floor. And which is kind of exactly what Atherton just did to Mal, but I suppose Atherton was more playing with Mal instead of Mal just going for the kill. But Mal doesn't kill him. He's told to finish off his opponent, or it means that his opponent is dishonoured. So Mal leaves him alive, although he does poke him with the sword a few times. Mercy is the mark of a great man is one of my favourite Mal moments, and it feels so true to his character. And with Ath beaten, humiliated and blacklisted by Inara, Harrow agrees to let Mal transport the cargo because of the strength and passion that he showed in defending Inara's honour, and if Mal will show that kind of protection over Harrow's cargo, he's more than happy to do business with him. So all's well that ends well. Now that cargo, which does tie into next week's episode, is a herd of cattle, again cowboys in space. We finish with Inara and Mal sharing a moment with some wine in the cargo bay, with Mal admitting he's glad she stayed on Serenity. After Simon stitched him up, of course. Now, I don't know what it is about this episode that makes it my favourite. The writing is as tight as all the other episodes, the style is the same. The characters feel just as true to themselves as all the other episodes. The story and the weekly caper is as strong as you would expect, but for some reason this episode stands out. There's a charm to it, it's like a certain magic. It's in the air throughout this episode. Maybe it's because this is the first episode that we really get to see the crew relax and be themselves. Mixed in with a lot of the childlike joy and even hints of romance with Mal and Inara. And the childlike joy of Kaylee. I mean, Mal's not really childlike or joyful. Maybe it's just the novelty of it, having a ball and seeing how the other side live. It's a very different setting to what we've seen so far, and it just makes me smile. This whole episode, every time I watch it, the more I love it. As with the show, but there's just something about it. I am truly under its spell, and I can't imagine my life any other way. And I think that's quite a nice place to close this off and lead us nicely into our review for episode 5, called Safe, next Wednesday. We've also got the next episode of WandaVision for review, that's on Friday. We're at the season finale. I have reservations. If you've seen my last WandaVision review, you will know why. But hopefully this will stick the landing. But as always, if you've enjoyed this or any of my other content, please do subscribe, like, and especially comment. About Firefly, about WandaVision, about whatever you want really. I'm not too fussed. But I'd love to hear what you think so far. And with that, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.